Good morning. It's Monday, June 17th, and I read an article yesterday that dealt with racial discrimination. And I can tell you that I live in a neighborhood that is probably almost 100% white. And this article got me to thinking about whether or not there were any blacks in my neighborhood, whether or not there were any blacks in the schools that my children went to. And I have no idea of what the true ethnicity is in my neighborhood. I'm not sure how many Christians are here, how many Jews are here. I know there are very few blacks in the neighborhood, that's for sure. But as far as the rest of the ethnic makeup is in the neighborhood, I'm not sure. But I don't ever, well, I shouldn't say I don't ever. It's rare that I see a black person in this neighborhood shopping or anything like that. So I have to believe that there's a form of discrimination that exists, a subtle form of discrimination. I'm not sure that the people who own the homes in this neighborhood would necessarily consider a black person as a good customer if they wanted to sell their home. And I'm not sure that any black person who's buying a home would necessarily want to be a trailblazer and live in an all-white neighborhood. So that brings me to the story that I read in the newspaper online about a black woman who was a professional, has a doctorate of some form, makes a good living, and saw an ad in the paper for an apartment that she wished to buy for $750,000, which is what she bid on the apartment. And the woman who owned the apartment was an 84-year-old white woman. And she accepted the offer, but she hadn't met the person who was attempting to buy her apartment. And that didn't happen until much later in the story, when the woman who wanted to buy her apartment, who was black, and her boyfriend, who was also black, took a ride down to see what the apartment really looked like. And they had never met the seller before. And apparently the realtor that was showing them the apartment was showing them the apartment while the seller was not in attendance. But as they were leaving the apartment, the seller met them. And the seller was kind of shocked. She was an 84-year-old white woman, and she was shocked that this black couple was about to buy her apartment. So when the buyers left, the white woman reneged on the deal. And that set off a chain of events because the black woman and her boyfriend were prepared to fight for that apartment. It was a great apartment. And apparently the fight went on for a little while. But it turns out that the seller's children convinced their mother to give up the apartment. And she did give up the apartment, but with some rules that were written down that she wasn't responsible for any of the repairs that had to be made to the apartment if she was going to give it up. And there were some repairs that had to be made on the apartment, but nevertheless, the black woman and her boyfriend accepted that, signed the deal, and they're going to move into this apartment sometime this summer. But it was a mess. It was a mess. And so that got me to thinking about all of these things that exist in my neighborhood and whether or not my neighbors would be comfortable if somebody was willing to sell one of their homes to a black person. I'm not so sure they would be comfortable with that. So discrimination is a huge conundrum in this country. It hasn't disappeared. And according to what I read in the article, something like 87% of real estate transactions occur under the guise of discrimination. Realtors recognize the fact that it's difficult difficult to sell apartments or houses to people of the wrong persuasion because you have those people who want to live in an all-white neighborhood. And the realtors feel compelled to honor the wishes of those neighbors. So that's a big problem in this country. Discrimination is not going to go away when we have situations like that. And you all know that anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination are on the rise in this country. They're not getting any better. They're getting worse. So it's an interesting feature that we live under, that you may own a home and you could have a prospective buyer who's the wrong color, and the realtor won't help him get that apartment or that house because the neighbors will be upset. And I don't know how many of my neighbors would be upset by this. And I'm trying to think of how many kids in my kids' high school are black. I don't know of many. And I know that when my children were playing on teams and everything, there were a few blacks, but not that many. So I think that this country has a long way to go before it gets around to eliminating all forms of discrimination. Now, we have seen people rise to the heights of their professions. We had a black president. So those things are not beyond our reach, but discrimination is still a major problem in this country. There's no question about that. And this example of the realtor and the black person buying an apartment is a perfect example. Now, that did not happen in New York. It happened in Virginia. But it doesn't matter where it happened because discrimination still exists. It's not going to go away that easily. And it's a shame that the woman, who's a little bit younger than I am, tried to renege on this deal that she made with a black woman. But it was her children that convinced her that she had to go through with the deal. And good for them. So I leave you with that. Think about the discrimination that still exists in this country. Think about how far we have come and how far we still have to go. Not a pleasant thought necessarily. Have a great day. Bye.